Welcome back to the Zero Lab. Today we're going to be taking a look at a couple of rogue decks that seem to be doing okay in the Temporal Forces format online in these online tournaments that we're watching play out currently. These deck lists come from 100 plus player online tournaments where they got at least top 8 or better. So I wanted to take a look at a couple of these deck lists and give you an idea of some sort of decks outside of maybe the top 6 to 7 decks in the format, what those decks outside of that could look like, and that are also seem to be doing well in these online tournaments. So starting out, we have Dialga VSTAR. Dialga VSTAR is a card that's always been really interesting because it has that Star Chronos VSTAR power. For 5 metal energy, it does 220 damage, and then you can take another turn. Obviously, taking an extra turn is very good in the Pokemon TCG, and this deck seems to be enabled by the new Metang from Temporal Forces with that Metal Maker ability. It says once during your turn, you may look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any metal energy you find there to your Pokemon, and then shuffle the other cards and put them on the bottom of your deck. And so if you get a bunch of these Metangs out and play a bunch of metal energies, as this deck does, you can be attaching a bunch of metal energy every turn to power up these Dialgas. And obviously Dialga's first attack does 40 plus 40 more for each energy attached to it. So you can be swinging for high damage on these Dialgas, as well as if you get a lot of energy attached. So this deck is playing a 4/4 of that Metang. Of course, that card is what is enabling this entire deck. A 2/2 Dialga V-Star, 2 of the Zamazentas with that Retaliate attack. So for 3 energy, you do 100 plus 120 more if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn. So just a good single prize attacker in this deck. And then this deck, which is something we haven't seen in a ton of these Dialga decks before, is playing that 1/1 Barrel as well to draw some more cards. And then a Mew EX. Mew EX can be powered up by that Metal Maker ability as well, and can copy cool attacks like Radiant Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken or Charizard EX's attack at the end of the game to deal enough damage to one-hit KO a Charizard EX. For support accounts, playing 4 Iono, 4 Arven, 1 Boss's Orders, and then 4 Ultra Ball, 3 Buddy Buddy Poffin, 3 Super Rods. Obviously, you want to get your evolution Pokemon back if they get knocked out, but you want to also be able to refill your deck with metal energies that get discarded so that you have more likelihood of hitting those metal energies off of the Metal Maker ability. 3 Nest Ball, a Lost Vacuum, a Prime Catcher, a Vitality Band, and then 1 Technical Machine Evolution. Obviously, the Technical Machine Evolution is the best way to get into your Metangs at the start of the game when we're playing for Arven. Not too hard to find that Technical Machine Evolution, and without something like Evolution Incense in the format, it might be hard to find enough of your Metangs to get them evolved, so the TM Evolution is going to put in a lot of work here. Obviously, this deck seems very cool. Taking an extra turn with the Dialga V-Star is awesome, but I think it can struggle with consistency and setup. And if your opponent has quick ways of making quick work of your Dialga V-Stars, it can be pretty tough to stay ahead in the prize trade. The other tough thing is if your opponent's able to target down your Beldums early, like against Chien-Pao, they could use the Moonlight Shuriken to knock out your Beldums before they evolve, or against something like Lost Box, they can use Moonlight Shuriken plus spread damage with Sableye to get some things happening on those Metangs. That would certainly be tough. And then against decks like Charizard, they do play the Radiant Charizard, so that can take a one-hit KO on your Dialga V-Stars near the end of the game and swing the prize trade in their favor. So this is a really interesting deck. I think it's a lot of fun. You can hit big damage with that Metal Blast attack on Dialga V-Star when you have a lot of energy attached, and combine that with an extra turn from the Star Chronos. You can definitely cheese some games off of some people. But overall, I think this deck will kind of stay in the sort of C tier of decks. Very fun to play, functional deck, but overall maybe not strong enough in the meta. Moving on, we have an Espathra EX deck playing a 2/2 Banette EX. So this is sort of an item lock disruption style of deck. They play the Fluttermane, obviously, that can slow down Lost Box, since Lost Box wouldn't be able to use Comfy's Flower Selecting. And then the Espathra has always been a very good attacker into things like the Charizard EX because it is a grass type that hits Charizard for weakness. The Pokemon League headquarters plus Espathra EX's ability makes basic attacking decks have a really tough time getting enough energy onto their active Pokemon to even use their attacks. So I imagine that this would have a really good matchup into things like Ancient Box and Future Box, because they would have a tough time just using those attacks on for a Future Box. For example, Miraidon wants to attack for 1 energy, but if you have Espathra in the active plus Pokemon League headquarters out, that Miraidon has to attack for 3 energy, and that's a lot harder. And then against decks like Charizard EX, like Chien-Pao, you just make things very difficult for them with the Banette EX, because item locking them means that they can't rare candy. And for Chien-Pao, if they can't rare candy, they can't get Baxcaliburs out. And even if they got one Baxcalibur out before you item locked, they can't use their superior energy retrievals to get energies back. So can just make that matchup pretty awkward. So I actually do think that this deck seems very strong. I wonder how consistent it is to set up, but once set up, it does have some really interesting plays it can make against the top decks in the meta right now. However, I do think that that consistency could be a struggle for it, as well as I think you're playing a little bit of matchup roulette. You're hoping to just hit those very good matchups. I imagine that Chien-Pao would be a very good matchup if you can go first and get that item lock going. It means they never get into the Baxcalibur, and then Charizard EX would probably be a very good matchup as well as the Ancient and Future boxes. And that does seem like a wide portion of the meta, but I think that this deck could struggle against things like Lugia, for example, where they can use the Cinchinos to just take big one-shot KOs on your things like Espathra and Banette. And the item lock doesn't really do too much for them, because against Lugia, yes, they want to Ultra Ball away their Archeops, but if they can't do that, they can research them away, or they can use Read the Wind while you're trying to item lock them. So I think this deck is playing a little bit of matchup roulette, and it also seems a little less consistent than other top decks in the format, but once it gets going, it does have some pretty powerful effects in it. And then the final deck that we're going to take a look at is the Raging Bolt EX deck. This is another deck that some people were pretty high on when the cards were first revealed. The Raging Bolt has the Bellowing Thunder attack for lightning fighting. It does 70 times every energy that you discard for the attack, essentially. So you can discard a bunch of energy, and for 4 energy you can do 280 damage, and if you discard 5 energy you can do 350 damage. And then you have the Sandy Shock EX that has the ability that once your opponent has 4 prize cards or less, you can just attach a fighting energy each turn to each of your Sandy Shocks EX. So that's a way to accelerate more energy into play. And on top of that, you do have the Professor Sada's Vitality, accelerating even more energy into play. And then on top of that, you have the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule that can give your Raging Bolt EXs 300 HP. So this seems to be like a very strong deck. It's a high hit point, big basic attacker that's going to be able to take big one-hit KOs. However, the consistency is a little bit of an issue for this deck, as well as the fact that you just have some decks in the format that can outdo you in the prize trade. So Lugia, for example, yes, you can take a big one-shot KO on the Lugia, but once they get their Cinchinos going or Chinchinos going, they can trade 2 for 1 against your big basic EX attackers. As well as Charizard, obviously, if you go second against Charizard, they do have the maximum belt, so they can knock out things. Well, they can't knock out your Raging Bolt until you've taken 1 prize, even with the maximum belt, but they can knock out like your Sandy Shocks, your Mew EX, and your Squawkabillies pretty easily with the Charizard. So if you don't start the prize trade against Charizard, you can fall behind pretty fast in it, as well as the fact that they do have the Radiant Charizard to swing that prize trade back in their favor, taking 2 prizes with a 1 prize attacker. But Raging Bolt seems like a very fun deck to play as well. I know everybody loves using Professor Sada's Vitality to attach extra energy for turn, and it's always fun to discard a bunch of energy and start blowing things up with the Raging Bolt. However, I do think that this deck, it probably remains in that C tier as well. But these are some interesting decks that have been doing well in online tournaments, or have done well in a couple of online tournaments, which means that they can compete in the meta. If these are decks that you find to be really fun to play and you're not really clicking with some of the more top tier meta decks, these could be decks that you could fall back on and learn to play very well, and you could find some success in them at your locals or even at EOIC or one of the regionals coming up. It would be really cool to see one of these more rogue type decks do very well at UIC, and hopefully this video was informative for you if you're looking for some decks outside of the top tier decks right now to play on TCG Live or at your upcoming locals. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.